Whispering Gravity, Rogue Waves, Nonlinear Code, and a Colluding Multiverse. Episode 1, The 8 Sigma Spike. The gull-studded haze of late afternoon lay over Point Loma like gauze when the RV Cascadia, a 76-meter twin-screw ice-classed research ship, eased away from the naval base pier. Her diesel-electric thrusters sculled a slow arabesque against the ebb tide, and every scupper glittered with galvanized chain. Shoreside well-wishers, professors, spouses, half-sleepy children waved until the ship's blue hull merged with a horizon the color of molten pewter. Dr. Annika Jespersen, Scripps Institution of Oceanography's newly tenured physical oceanography prodigy, stood abaft the bridge wing rail, inhaling the iodine tang that always reminded her of childhood dinghy races on Ursund. Years of work lay in her duffel: MATLAB toolboxes, custom neural nets trained on ECMWF hindcasts, and, most crucially, the encrypted bundle of telemetry that had pulled her entire life into the present mission. That data packet had arrived 16 days earlier from an Alamo, air-launched autonomous micro-observer, float, Unit F731K, dropped months earlier by a NOAA P3 hurricane hunter, then forgotten. In the early hours of 18 June, 041356Z, the float's nadir-looking K-band altimeter had pinged a return that, when translated through the onboard callman filter, read 58.0 plus or minus 0.4 meters significant crest height. The float's AI flagged the point as sensor anomaly and queued it for deletion. Only a redundant CRC mismatch kept the file quarantined instead of erased. Annika, performing a routine health check of the coastal float fleet, noticed the orphan. She ran it through a Rayleigh tail analysis. 8 standard deviations above a 7.1-meter sea state predicted by ERA 5 at the same grid. 1 chance in 10 to the power of 18. A not quite impossible scream from the ocean. Now, watching the San Diego skyline recede, she replayed the discovery, how she had burst into the weekly wave dynamics seminar, shoes half on, and commandeered the projector. How the room, usually a polite murmur of donuts and grad student dread, had turned electric, and how Dr. Keone Kahana, visiting associate professor from the University of Hawaiʻi at Manoa, had leaned forward, pointer pen motionless, and said in a voice soft as surf at Waimea, "Unless our priors are wrong." Keone arrived on the Cascadia with 2 battered pelican cases and a pocket notebook whose pages bore tiny graphite equations in a manic Maui Sun scrawl. A third-generation Hawaiian Japanese, he possessed equal fluency in differential geometry and slack-key guitar, but the ocean's non-linear whispering was his real native language. He and Annika shared an odd camaraderie, skeptical, competitive, fused by mutual respect. At 1704 local, they convened in the Level 2 Dry Lab, a fluorescent semi-cathedral lined with oscilloscopes, a laser particle image velocimetry bench, and 6 brand-new SPC Nexus quantum gravimeters, their sapphire housings still wearing factory shrink wrap. Overhead, a glass bulkhead doubled as whiteboard. Keone's stylus already traced the Kuroshio extension's meander like a dragon across the North Pacific. 8 Sigma, Annika began, writing the Greek sigma in bold loops. Rayleigh tail probability, roughly 1 in 10 to the 18th. Call it a statistical unicorn. Or a rewrite of the tail distribution, Keone said. He tapped the float icon on a GIS layer. What if the wave field isn't stationary? What if some external forcing locally steepens the spectrum? The ERA 5 mean can't see that kind of spike. Graduate engineer Mason Rutledge, 25, ex-US Navy nuke technician turned Scripps mechanical systems wizard, strode in smelling of WD-40. Winch checks are green. Wave glider is secured. Backup SBD buoy likewise. L-bands clean. And O-3 satellite burst just cleared, so we're dark. Chief Mate Tala Faumuina, late of Samoa Shipping, rang standby ahead. Salt water drummed against the hull as the Cascadia cleared the kelp-fringed breakwater. Annika's briefing slid from theory into operations. 1. Destination: 29 degrees 41 minutes north, 162 degrees 17 minutes west, an unremarkable node in the North Pacific subtropical gyre, renamed in-house the Polygon of Silence. Second goals: retrieve Alamo F731K, still transmitting low-gain pings. Deploy a distributed sensor web, wave glider, sail drone, twin eco-sub minis to map wave spectra, currents, and micro-gravimetric fluctuations. Interrogate any rogue wave formation in real time using LiDAR, HF radar, and the ship's new 64-beam multi-static sonar array. 3. Risk: unknown. Forecast significant wave heights en route were modest, but the anomaly itself mocked prediction. By midnight, the Cascadia crossed the Coronado Shelf and set her course west by northwest, engines humming 81 revolutions per minute. The city's sodium halo vanished, replaced by a vault of stars so sharp they seemed within plucking distance. Below decks, Annika pulled up wave mechanics lecture slides. Modulational instability, where narrow-band energy focuses into supercrests. Envelope solitons solving the nonlinear Schrödinger equation, rapidly varying current gradients acting as optical lenses for swell packets. Each mechanism could, under perfect lab conditions, summon a 25-meter mound of water. None could explain 58. Keown joined her at 2:10 a.m., barefoot, mug of Cononay dark coffee in one hand. He scrolled the screen to a blank slide and typed 2 words in 72-point font. Or new. Beneath, he drew 3 nested circles: known physics, known ocean, unknown perturbations. A question mark bloomed in the smallest. When he looked up, his eyes shone with the unsettling mix of terror and delight that only frontier scientists understand. 4 days into the voyage, routine settled in. 0400 to 0800 watch, gravimeter calibrations, HF radar sweeps, forenoon, CTD casts and nutrient assays. Afternoon, maintenance drills. Evenings, Tala's Samoan galley mate served ulu and coconut curry, and Mason's PlayStation tournaments echoed from the crew lounge. Above it all, the ocean rolled smooth as poured mercury, the barometer static at 1,016 hectopascals. Then, at 23:38 ship's time, a soft chime announced a queued telemetry packet from F731K. Keown decrypted it. His brow furrowed. Pressure depth readings oscillated plus or minus 3 decibars in a sawtooth pattern, equal to the float bobbing in waves 2 meters high. But the float's GPS indicated 29 degrees 41.3 minutes north, 162 degrees 17.1 minutes west, exactly the anomaly waypoint, 3 days ahead of schedule. Impossible. Alamo's drift downstream at roughly 15 centimeters per second. F731K had traveled 520 nautical miles in a week, tenfold its expected speed. Either it hitched a ride on a jet stream current we've never charted, Annika mused, or something pulled it. Or pushed, Keown countered. Think vertical momentum injection. Bursting bubble columns venting upward could give the float lift, surf it hundreds of miles. Mason, peering over their shoulders, grinned. Giant bubble columns, like the Kraken breathing. Love it. They laughed, weary but sparkling. None slept well that night. Episode 2. Into the Polygon of Silence. Dawn of Day 5 arrived glassy flat and unnervingly bright, as if the sunspot cycle had spiked overnight. The ship's Seafox sensors logged photosynthetically active radiation 18% higher than climatology, though cumulus cover was near zero. Over breakfast, Bio-Optics postdoc Dr. Kalia Akana studied the FlowCam slides. The seawater teemed with Emiliania huxleyi coccolithophores, chalky phytoplankton whose calcium carbonate discs can whiten the ocean from orbit. Backscatter coefficients gone non-linear. Kalea told the mess table, her pidgin accent thickening with wonder. Albedo's basically snowpack level. Annika frowned. A bloom that dense needs stratified surface water and weeks of stability. We've had 4 calm days, still too short. Something's fertilizing from below. Mason arrived with a laptop. Directional Wave Rider shows the groupiness index, ratio of mean crest period to dominant period, jumped from 2.1 to 4.4 since 0200. Packet energy is clustering. Classic pre-rogue signal. They took the lift to the bridge. Chief Mate Thaler stared at the X-band radar. Vast, dark patches, sea clutter dropout zones, speckled the screen as if the ocean itself were blinking. At 0327Z, a new return bloomed, a linear wall moving 22 knots, bearing 027, range 2 nautical miles. Squall? Mason asked. No rain echo, Thaler said. Sea state anomaly. Annika's heart thumped. Hard to starboard, she ordered, in civilian science tone but iron-edged. Thaler relayed, and the helmsman spun the wheel. Engines revved to flank, but out the rain-streaked bridge glass, though no rain fell, they saw the coming Titan, a black-green slab, spindrift veils flying like shredded pennants. Keown's rational mind protested. Deep water waves cannot outrun group velocity, yet the wall advanced, unstoppable. Deck klaxons roared. Keown sprinted to the console, toggled free flood doors, massive valves that, when opened, allow seawater into void spaces to lower center of gravity. The Cascadia heeled 32 degrees to port, deck rail nearly in the water. In the Level 2 laboratory, a Secchi disk, that innocuous white circle, became a discus of doom that annihilated a 60K spectroradiometer. Pitch heave sensor reads 9G, Mason called, voice Doppler warped by vibration. And then collision. The bow knifed into the liquid cliff. White curtains swallowed the forecastle. The ship acted less like a surface vessel, more like a briefly submerged submarine. Through the bridge windows, water shimmered a psychedelic green from stimulated bioluminescent dinoflagellates. For 2 heartbeats there was no up or down, only hydraulic violence. A prayer not to breach. Momentum carried them through. The bow burst skyward, shedding tons of brine sparkling in sunlight like a shell burst. The stern dropped with a slam that rattled teeth. Gyroscopes squealed, then equilibrium. Silence, broken only by ragged breathing and the harsh tick of cooling steel. Keown exhaled so sharply he coughed. Annika leaned against a bulkhead, knees liquid. Her fingertips tingled as if she had touched a live wire. That wasn't statistical interference, she whispered. That wave was aimed. Thaler's deep voice overlapped the hiss of recovering electronics. Report damage. Within an hour they tallied. Crushed deck crates, 2 injured crew with bruised ribs, a fractured masthead anemometer, and a dent to the port shear strake big enough to swallow a fist. Miraculously, no flooding. Data recorders had captured everything. 200 FPS stereoscopic surface cameras, X-band Doppler, micro-G accelerometers, the full acoustic pressure stack. But the intangible damage was to the collective psyche. Mariners rely on patterns, Beaufort scales, synoptic charts, the comforting calculus of risk. A wave that hunts breaks the contract. They hove to for repairs, welding team clanging until sparks outshone the stars. Keown and Kalea processed spectral snapshots. Unlike classic rogue waves, formed by constructive interference among many harmonics, their monster exhibited near monochromatic energy at 0.07 Hz, yet with group velocity 50% faster than deep water theory allowed. Mason proposed a heresy. What if the wave isn't a surface gravity wave at all? Maybe we're looking at a coupled acoustic gravity hybrid. Sound speed in water is 1,500 meters per second, could shove energy forward like a piston. Annika shook her head. We saw crest steepness, matching Stokes' fourth-order gravity theory. Acoustic modes would self-damp. Unless She trailed off, eyes focusing on a farther horizon than the porthole offered. Unless the energy injection wasn't in water, suppose the forcing is external, something tugging at space-time itself, raising water like dough under fingers. Keown scribbled mathematics. External potential phi of Tx superposed on the Bernoulli equation, leading to an effective pressure gradient term reflecting localized gravitational modulation. It was elegant, insane, and matched the data to two significant figures. At 1900 Z, as the crew resumed the westward push, the barometer fell despite clear skies, dropping to 1,004 hectopascals in 2 hours. Kalea reported surface chlorophyll spiking 400%, phytoplankton feeding on an upwelling of nutrient-rich abyssal water. CTD winches groaned all evening, bringing up 4-meter rosettes green with diatoms usually found 500 meters below. "I think the ocean just burped," Mason quipped. Annika corrected him. "Or something squeezed it." Below, the ultra-stable quartz fiber gravimeter ticked out anomalies, plus, minus 3 microgals, unheard of at sea. They plotted the deviations over time. A cunning pattern emerged: spiky, sawtooth pulses every 204 seconds, exactly the transit interval between their rogue crest and the next wave they half expected, half dreaded. At 22:50 Z, a young deckhand named Victor from La Paz on starboard lookout called Luces del Mar, lights of the sea. The team rushed topside. Ahead, the water flickered with turquoise strobes, but they weren't bioluminescent patches. They were lines, perfect radials from a point on the horizon, as if an unseen lighthouse spun beneath the waves. "Sector scan," Tala muttered. "Who scans water with light?" Keown's answer was a whisper lost to the wind. Something that lives below it, or beyond it. They set new waypoints for dawn, deeper into the Polygon of Silence. Night watch rotated amid a hush broken only by the sonar's slow ping, as if the ship questioned the abyss and received no answer. Episode 3. The Fractured Thermocline. The sun's first glint off the Pacific revealed a bruise-colored slick quivering around the Cascadia. Crew who had sailed 40 seasons swore the color, somewhere between hematite and petrol, was new to them. The air smelt faintly metallic, like struck flint. Chief Scientist Dr. Annika Jespersen stood on the forward A-frame watching the rosette sampler ascend, the Kevlar cable humming like a cello string. When the 24 Niskin bottles cleared the surface, water sheeted from their grey PVC shells in gelatinous ropes. "Sloppy as egg drop soup," Mason muttered, helping winch the heavy carousel onto the deck. They ferried the bottles into the wet lab. Each aliquot looked stratified: clear top, cloudy middle, almost gelatinous bottom. Kalea pipetted 10 milliliters into the flow cam. The monitor filled with images, not neat coccolith discs, but jagged shards, like calcite shaken in a paint mixer. "Plankton shells have shattered. Never seen mechanical breakage at microscale," she whispered. Keown paged through the CTD data, temperature inversions every few tens of meters instead of the usual single boundary at about 150 meters. Vertical shear is negative. Warm under cold under warm. We're a parfait from hell. Annika keyed a live plot. That means density is upside down. The column wants to turn over violently, but it hasn't, which is impossible without a stabilizing force. Suggests an external potential counteracting buoyancy, like localized reduced gravity. The words reduced gravity stuck to the lab's condensation-fogged porthole like a dare. They needed a dynamic map. Mason prepped the sail drone SD-231, an orange-hulled solar-panel trimaran bristling with sensors. As the A-frame swung it overboard, Tala kept the ship idling at half ahead to avoid prop wash. Once free, the sail drone's wingsail trimmed itself and vectored toward programmed waypoints in a widening spiral. Within the hour, its ADCP beams told a crazy story. Surface current 1 knot west, but at 40 meters, a 2-knot eastbound jet. At 300 meters, a looping vortex 2 kilometers in diameter, spinning against the prevailing North Pacific gyre. A toroidal gyre, Keown said, tracing it with a stylus. That can't survive without a constant energy driver. In the electronics bay, systems engineer Alika Reyes was passing HF radar phase errors. Every 204 seconds, a beat synchronized with the gravimeter pulses, a transient 1.43 Hertz oscillation laced the backscatter. She highlighted a waterfall plot. It resembled piano strings hammered in perfect rhythm. Somebody or something is ringing the ocean like a bell, she said. They broke for an emergency hypothesis meeting in the ops theater. Chairs bolted to deck still rattled from latent vibration. On the smart wall, Keown sketched potential coupling of barotropic Rossby modes with an extrinsic graviton interference field. He hesitated before writing the word graviton, then underlined it twice. Annika counter-scribbled in red. Microfracture in a cold, dark matter filament intersecting Earth's barycenter. Release of bulk energy into the ocean. Mason shook his head. We're engineers, not Marvel writers. Could be crustal flexure, piezoelectric discharge from the Pacific plate. Moonquakes after that big perigee last week. Except the moon's apogee right now, tidal potential is minimum, Annika said. And crustal flexure doesn't create negative shear in stratification. Arguments tangled. Voices rose, decibels matching heartbeats. Finally, Tala rapped the bulkhead with a chart weight. Enough. I don't care if it's Thor's hammer or a bent brain. Tell me what keeps my crew alive. Silence cooled the room like Arctic air. Annika straightened. Rule 1. We stay mobile. Never sit broadside to suspected events. Rule 2. All hands wear immersion suits topside. Rule 3. We deploy nodes fast, so next strike gives us a crossfire of data. Keown added, and we pray the sea keeps explaining itself before it kills us. By late afternoon, the low sun crowned every swell in gold, but boluses of mist blew off the warm over cold fractures like steam from fissures. The sail drone's live video stream flickered. The water ahead periodically dented downward, a 5-meter bowl appearing and vanishing, the opposite of a crest. Mason coined it the negative trough. Conservation will pay that depression back, probably in a spike, he said over comms. Question is when and where. 2017 Z. The gravimeter twitched, 3 microgals negative, then positive. Annika's desk accelerometer registered a mild vertical jolt. Keown, in the starboard sponson, felt his chair lighten, then press him down in the span of one breath. Pulse at timestamp. Sync all sensors, Alika radioed. They waited. 30 seconds. 1 minute. Then the sea around the Cascadia convulsed. It was not a crest moving toward them, but a bulge forming under them. The negative trough they had watched on remote video, but now writ large enough to cradle the entire vessel. The deck canted outward, railings pointed at sky where water had been. Engage dynamic ballast, Keown shouted. Aft pumps roared, seawater flooding void tanks. The ship's draft increased by 1 meter, buying stability. But the bowl deepened to 7 meters, 10, 12. Their horizon rose around them like a stadium. Mason triggered emergency power to bow thrusters, hoping to climb the inner slope. Propellers bit water, screeched cavitation. The depression bottomed at 16 meters, then began a vicious rebound. When the ocean returned, it did so with fury. Water erupted in a spline curve, inverting bowl to pinnacle. From the highest point, a filament of spray streaked straight into the stratosphere, so thin it refracted moonlight as a miniature halo. The Cascadia surfed the vertical face, pitched bow down as though aimed at the ocean floor, then leveled on the backside. The men and women aboard screamed, some in terror, some in astonished wonder. As quickly as it had arisen, the wave field normalized. Strangely, the surface flattened to mill-pond tranquility within 2 ship lengths. Only the ship's tremor and people's hammering pulses betrayed anything happened. Kalea stared at a handheld turbidimeter, its reading pegged at maximum. Density anomaly again. Seawater inside that trough lost bulk modulus, same as the first rogue. Something is boiling the water microscopically, Annika whispered. Not boiling, debinding. Gravity momentarily switched sign on the microscale. They retrieved the sail drone. Its data drive held a full 800 megabyte burst. Keone overlaid gravimeter strain, ADCP shear, HF radar phase. The curves locked like gears. Event amplitude correlated with a sawtooth gravitational tug superimposed on a 0.48 Hz standing wave. Alika laid the plots on the table. Looks designed, as if a signal's being broadcast and the ocean plays subwoofer. They slept little that night. The sea outside preternaturally flat, the sky lacerated by violet sheet lightning that made no thunder. Episode 4, Superposition's Edge. Morning broke in violent color. The sky overhead was clear cyan, yet along the horizon was a curtain of prismatic haze, refracting sunbeams into sideways rainbows. Mason, camera in hand, captured what looked like an oil slick in mid-air. At 0912, Z, the sail drone, relaunched pre-dawn, transmitted a warning. Pressure sensor dropped 5 millibars in 90 seconds. Atmospheric microfront, Thala guessed, though the ship's own barograph lagged the change by several minutes, as if the low had arrived under the sail drone only. Keone paced the bridge, his notebook's margin filled with integrals. Standing gravity wave nodes must rise through the water column and into troposphere, he muttered. Pressure depression equals local G reduction. Same fingerprint. Then came the next marvel. 2 kilometers off the port bow, the sea inflated into a dome, convex upward, 5 meters high, edges feathered with cat's paws. It did not travel. It simply was, a dimple in space-time. Its center sucked down, an inverse fountain, creating that negative trough Mason had named. Before the crew could react, the trough inverted explosively. The returning mass did not spread. It extruded upward as a needle 50 meters tall, 6 across, almost translucent because the water within was aerated by cavitation. Bioluminescent plankton trapped in the core shot green fireworks along the column. Tala's binoculars found the University of Hawaiʻi support vessel Kaiolohia, a 24-meter sailing research catamaran stationed as comms relay. The column leaned, pivoting plankton-lit like a torch against night, though it was broad daylight, and it aimed at the Kaiolohia. Bridge to Kaiolohia, rogue spike inbound. Break station, Tala barked on VHF-16. Static hissed back. Ionization from the electric sky rendered radio useless. On the Kaialohia's deck, lead geochemist Dr. Moana Lim grabbed the mast stay. She shouted orders. Starboard engine astern, both dagger boards down. Tech Brian Okuda dived for the ignition. The port engine coughed, but the starboard stalled. Fuel line flooded after the last crest. The catamaran clawed starboard, but inertia betrayed them. The water spike struck port bow like a pneumatic pile driver. Foam cascaded the trampoline net, swept Moana and Brian overboard. The cat's mast sheared, carbon fiber shards pinwheeled. A thump vibrated through ocean and air. Then silence. Underwater, Moana tumbled in green-lit churn. She triggered her auto-inflating harness. The CO2 cartridge bit. Buoyancy hauled her upward. Pain lanced her shoulder, socket wrenched by an errant shroud. She surfaced amid vortex current, saw Brian coughing beside a smashed life ring. She sculled over, clipped her harness to his vest. Together they drifted up the funneling wake into calmer chop. Cascadia launched the fast rescue craft within 4 minutes. Crew hauled Moana and Brian aboard, both hypothermic but alive. The Kaiolohia, though holed, miraculously floated, bulkhead sealed and port hull flooded to deckline. Tala elected to lash the injured catamaran alongside for tow rather than risk leaving it to be swallowed by the next freak. As salvage lines stretched, Kalea examined samples puked out of the rogue column, Water saturated with microbubbles, density down 4%. Cavitation means low pressure. The water literally fizzed. That's why wave number 2 formed a cylinder. It was fluid decompressing around a core of near vacuum. Annika correlated this with gravimeter logs. Each spike followed a pattern. First, a microgal dip, local G weakened, water expanded, density fell. Then an overswing positive, G strengthened, water collapsed upward, creating a crest. The ocean behaved like a driven harmonic oscillator, pulled and released by an invisible hand. During emergency repairs, Alika rigged antennas to exploit the strange static. She discovered the static itself encoded amplitude-modulated bursts at 0.48 Hz, too slow for radio, too fast for typical ocean wave periods. She piped it through a signal analyzer. A granular hiss resolved into chirps, 3 rising, 3 falling, repeating. Mason joked it sounded like an orca learning Morse. The pattern never varied. Night fell. Crew lashed themselves to bunk rails. Above, sheet lightning wove a violet net through a moonless sky. On deck, spools of rope drifted weightless for fractions of seconds. Local G fluctuating faster now, microgals ticking up to plus or minus 5. Water in a bucket formed standing ripples without disturbance. Capillary waves frozen in sculptured concentric rings. 0037Z. Gravimeter trace jumped, plateaued, jumped again. Amplitude doubled, Annika shouted, sprinting for the bridge. Outside, wind died, stars flared diamond hot. The sea went corpse still. Suddenly, every star to the east lifted upward, carving a parabola in the sky as though a cosmic spoon had scooped the heavens. A secondary image of the constellation Scorpius hovered under the first, like a reflection in invisible glass. Negative trough in the sky, Keown breathed, recording with a gyro-stabilized astro camera. The pressure dome just inverted half the troposphere. A hush of windless vacuum panned across the ship. Barometers free-fell 20 millibars in 5 seconds. Ears popped, breath steamed. Paperwork and coffee cups levitated an inch. Then gravity snapped back. Objects clattered. Mason's console alarm screamed. Battery charge climbed as if regenerative braking was engaged. "We're harvesting energy from gravity flex," he murmured. Above the horizon, the double Scorpius faded. Stars restitched themselves. The universe, embarrassed, pretended nothing had happened. Keown reviewed the astro images. Each double star showed differential distortion identical to gravitational lensing, but needing mass equivalent to a small moon, located nowhere. Lens implies curved spacetime without matter. That's pure gravity wave interference, he said, voice hoarse. Annika closed her eyes, letting equations swirl behind eyelids. A standing node where our brain brushes another. Energy tunnels across, wobbles G locally. Ocean responds. These rogue waves aren't random. They're seismographs for interbrain whisperings. Silence answered. Then Tala's steady command voice. Write theories later. The sea's still talking. They decided on bolder instrumentation. Float X expendables, titanium spheres with nanogravimeters, quantum clocks, optical frequency comb comms, ballasted to neutral at 400 meters. Keown insisted the array be triangular, baseline 2 kilometers, to time triangulate any passing gravity soliton. Preparations ran through black midnight. Arc welders hissed in spray, winches squealed, scientists became deckhands, no role distinctions now. In the distance, lightning etched the ocean's horizon. Thunder never came. By nautical dawn, the Cascadia and the crippled Kailua rode a sea calm enough to shame a pond. Crew rubbed grit from eyes. Coffee urns spat sludge. 3 gleaming float-X spheres waited in cradles, silver eggs holding the future of physics. Captain Vaziri gathered everyone by the starboard rail. His beard, salt-whitened, framed stern eyes. We have lost pride, nearly lost people. We could turn east, claim data enough for 10 nature papers. Or we can throw these eggs into Leviathan's throat and ask bigger questions. My ship obeys my order, but the mission obeys the consensus of its scientists. Annika looked at Keown, Keown at Kalea, Kalea at battered Moana in a sling but nodding fiercely. Mason raised a grease-blackened hand. "We stay," he said. Voices joined. "Stay." Even Tala, who had buried friends to the sea, nodded once. Vaziri exhaled what might have been relief, might have been dread. Then prepare to meet horizons stacked upon horizons. Float X deployment began 0438Z. The cradles swung, spheres splashed, acoustic transponders pinged, confirmation of target depth. Telemetry flowed, qubit series timestamps locking to shipboard cesium fountain clocks. 0507Z. Gravimeter spike, +3 microgals, -3, +6. Deck vibrated in infrasonic hum felt in collarbones. The sky's color bled toward ultraviolet, a hue human language never bothered to name. Water moved, not as swell, but as geometric translation. The horizon folded, a mirror ocean stacked atop the first. Between them shimmered a third surface, concave upward, water climbing invisible walls. All compasses spun, gyros gimbaled. People cried out, some in awe, some in animal fear. Float X1's live feed showed G trending to 0. Then -0.01 grams. Its internal accelerometer flagged freefall. After 0.87 seconds, link severed. The stacked oceans merged with a clap of implosion. Water hammered the hull like depth charge shock. When equilibrium returned, Float X1 was gone. In its place, a sphere of water the size of a beach ball hovered a meter above the surface, humming like high-voltage line. It burst, drenching the aft deck in a single warm splash. Pilot signals filled the radio. On every console, a line of text scrolled, stamped earlier than actual release. DT equals -4.6 seconds. DX equals 0.0. Float X1 had transmitted backwards in time. Absolute stillness followed. Crew staring at screens, at their own shaking hands, at an ocean suddenly small against the cosmos. Annika whispered, "Causality punctured." Captain Vaziri's jaw worked. We leave, or we rewrite physics live. They stayed. Episode 5. The Whispering Gravity. "I've replayed the packet 100 times, Alika whispered, eyes red-rimmed from the glow of the ops theater monitors. DT equals -4.6 seconds means the sphere's clock is sending information before the causative strain crosses its own coordinates. That's retro-causality inside the signal cone." Keown ran both hands through wind-snarled hair. "Or our notion of before and after fails where two brains overlap. The Float X lived on a geodesic that dipped into one universe, surfaced in ours, and re-entered the past light cone." His stylus tapped equations, Lorentz violating dispersion, closed time-like curves, sheathed in extra-dimensional metrics, until the e-ink screen looked tattooed. Captain Vaziri gave them 6 hours to devise a capture plan. If another soliton tore the ocean, they would trap the rogue wave instead of merely surviving it. The idea emerged from Mason's engine room musings. A wave forms when the gravitational node injects momentum. What if we created destructive interference, something equal and opposite, in the water column before the crest peaks? Jespersen and Kalea shaped the notion into engineering. Detonate supercavitating countercharges, basically shaped implosion devices, at precise depths. Instead of high explosive, each pod used slugs of hypercompressed nitrogen sheathed in frangible ceramic. When the pod's piezo stack sensed G-dip, it would eject the nitrogen, flashing it to vapor and collapsing a void in milliseconds. That void, timed correctly, should swallow momentum before it rose into a towering spike. "It's an oceanic interferometer," Jespersen summarized. "We cancel the soliton by giving it equal work to do in the opposite direction." They staged 3 pods, sinkers, A, B, C on the starboard rail, each ballasted to 200, 350, and 500 meters respectively. Autonomous release would unspool if the superconductor gravimeter twitched more than 6 microgals in under 2 seconds. The wounded Kaialogia served as floating control platform. Moana, shoulder-strapped, insisted on manning its still-functional Liaon Bank and Starlink terminal. Tala doubted the satellite dish would survive another wave, yet the redundancy eased everyone's nerves. At 1844 Z, the gravimeter chirped, +2, -7, +11 microgals. The algorithm flagged S-type pulse. Annika thumbed the GO switch. Sinkers splashed. 1, 2, 3 silver meteors. Depth pings echoed back. 185 meters, 343 meters, 506 meters. Arming. The sea stilled. A hush of airless calm settled so thick that voices carried from bow to stern with perfect clarity. Sparrows that had hitched rides from San Diego huddled motionless under the workboat David, their tiny chests hardly lifting. 20-second countdown, Kalea announced. Every eye scanned the horizon. For once, no bulge, no trough. Instead, the water sheeted mirror flat, a paradox of absence. Gravimeter rising, Alika called. +12 micrograms, +18, +25, numbers that would have made LIGO scientists hyperventilate. The ocean remained unnaturally calm, like a drumhead drawn to tearing point. Sinkers armed, Mason said. 0,0, saniye. The implosions were felt rather than heard, a travelling thump against everyone's sternum, as if an invisible breeze passed through flesh. The Pacific surface dimpled, not upward but downward, 3 perfect cones at the triangulated sinker sites. Then an emerald line raced from north to south, not water, but the interface of density change. Where that line touched a sinker cone, it hesitated, shimmered, and collapsed. The line resumed, encountered the next cone, collapsed again. At the third, it flickered out as if a fluorescent tube had lost power. For 17 breathless seconds, the ocean remained sheet-flat. No rogue crest. The gravimeter fell back to baseline plus 0.2 micrograms. Mason whooped. Kalea hugged Jespersen so hard their survival suits creaked. We jammed a gravity wave. But victory was premature. Every null experiment demands a control, and the universe obliged. 60 seconds later, the gravimeter shuddered to plus 38 micrograms, well beyond the auto range. A brutal payload, what Keown later called a ringing harmonic, slammed from the deep. The counterwave struck the Cascadia first. This time it came not as a single crest, but as a complex maze of intersecting solitons, a checkerboard of walls and canyons, each face steep as cathedral buttresses. Tala spun the wheel, trying to thread a diagonal channel. Water rose like castle ramparts on port and starboard. The keel scraped nothing but air. On the Kaialogia, Moana saw a gull-wing trough swallow the catamaran's bow, pinning the shattered mast horizontal. She gunned the lone operable engine, poor insurance against a cosmos that suddenly disdained motor power. The starboard float leapt sky-high, exposing dripping rudders before crunching down in foam. Cascadia's bridge deck windows blew in as a sidewall collapsed. Annika, bleeding from glass splinters, reached for the emergency ballast flush lever, flooding every dry tank, buying stability at the price of freeboard. Green water washed thigh-deep across the corridor. A server rack sparked, shorted, died. Keown, trapped in the radar shack, watched the spectral display freeze. He unclipped a harness, lurched through sluicing water, and slammed the breaker panel to isolate the fire. Electricity died. The ship went candle-dark. Only phosphorescent plankton outside cast ghost-green shadows through ruptured hull seams. Below, the engine room lurched. Mason saw the port shaft spin down light flash red. Cooling pumps cavitated. No seawater intakes because the propeller now bit only air. He closed the manual bypass, siphoned from ballast tanks to prime the lines, found leverage in the heavy iron serenity of a space built for catastrophe. For 5 eternal minutes, the intersecting rogue maze held them prisoner. Each countercrest that the sinker cones absorbed seemed to redirect energy into a lateral mode. Water no longer obeyed the dispersion relation. It slithered like frustrated magma seeking a vent. Moana cut visual data from a GoPro on the Kaialohia. The footage would later stun reviewers. Waves moving in perfect right angles, carving T-junctions, as if reality adopted a 3-dimensional Cartesian grid. Observers swore the ocean looked pixelated. When the maze finally collapsed, abruptly, as if a switch flipped, the Pacific exploded outward in a ring wave that radiated 20 kilometers. Both ships found themselves wallowing in normal swell of 2 meters, engines functional, hulls intact. But every person aboard felt older, as though seconds had been siphoned directly from their lifespans. They counted losses. 2 laboratory vans demolished, forward scientific winch sheared, 10 injured, lacerations, cracked ribs, concussions, yet no fatalities. That night they assembled in the mess, flagship and catamaran crews together. Coconut curry steam mingled with epoxy fumes from urgent patch jobs. Keown set a battered laptop on the table, kludged to operate on residual battery. He replayed Sinker's ABC strain logs. Instead of null data, he displayed a double peak. The first a clean cancellation, the second a surge triple magnitude. The soliton compensated, he said quietly. Our interference was detected, matched, overridden. By the ocean's dynamics? Kalea asked. Or by whatever is driving those dynamics, Jespersen said. She tapped the trace. It's adaptive. It learns. Tala crossed arms heavy with bruises. Then we stop fighting water and study the mind behind it. Alika snapped fingers. We've got a transmitter, the static at 0.48 hertz. Maybe it's handshake protocol. We answer, not with ballast bombs, but information. Over the next 48 hours, they repurposed the ship's LF sonar array into a broadband gravity-modulated transmitter. The concept was half mad. Use synchronized shifting of ballast and the ship's own mass distribution to send minute gravity ripples, megagal Morse, into the node. Mason welded hydraulic rams to roll free engines fore and aft. Weight shifts produced plus or minus 0.5 micrograms local G variation. Paltry, but perhaps enough. They devised a message, 6 beats up, 6 down, the same triplet chirps the static had carried, but in reverse phase. Jespersen called it echoing the whisper. Keown loaded the waveform into the control PLC. At 0410Z, the Cascadia became the world's strangest telegraph key, shuttling 200-ton diesels on hydraulic skids. The response came after 8 sequences. The gravimeter twitched an exact mirror and stopped. Ocean calm endured. No rogue waves. For the first time in 9 days, the horizon looked simply blue. What did we just agree to? Mason said into the hush. No one answered. Episode 6. Horizons Multiplying. 2 days of deceptive peace allowed deep repair. The Kaialohia received carbon fiber splints. Cascadia's servers booted from backups, bruises yellowed toward healing. But each sunset painted the cloud bases ultra-violent violet, a constant reminder the sky itself had tasted inverted gravity. Keown spent nights modeling extra-dimensional interference. 2 brains, call them A and B, oscillating around a shared attractor in 11-dimensional bulk. Where nodes coincided, energy tunneled as neutrino-like gravitons. Earth's ocean, fluid and massive, rang like Chladni sand on a drum. The model predicted recurrence. The node would sharpen until phase lock triggered a macro collision, dumping orders of magnitude more energy. That moment, by float X temporal offset, would occur noon local on July 7th. We barely survived micro events, Tala said after the briefing. A macro collision will pulp us. Unless we exit the Polygon, Vaziri offered. Annika pushed hair behind ears, mouth full of stubborn angle. If recurrence is global along the node line, running buys no safety. We flee, we lose all instrumentation, and the chance to watch epical physics unfold. Silence. Then Kalea. We stay. This time, no vote. Resolve was unanimous, fatalistic but electric. D minus 12 hours. They reseeded Float X2 and 3, plus 4 jury-rigged Float Y probes, pressure housings cannibalized from spare CTD cages, each with a MEMS gravimeter, atomic clock, and laser gyroscope. Deployed at 600 meters diamonds, 10 kilometers apart, they would whisper qubit pings through water and, if connection snapped, log to radiation-hardened C-fast cards for later retrieval. D 4 hours, 0.48. Hertz static resumed, but phase shifted 90 degrees. Alika keyed the ballast telegraph to respond in orthogonal phase, mathematical handshake complete. T0, 11:59:55 local, July 7th, 2025. Gravimeter trace climbed off-scale plus 120 micrograms. Water ahead glassed over, reflecting sun like a forge-polished mirror. Compasses tumbled, gyros targeted nonsense, men and women strapped into seats. 12:002. The ocean peeled open, no other phrase suffices. A kilometer-wide rift unzipped, revealing bands of color, indigo water, pale silver mist, black void speckled with starlight. At the chasm's base hung a lattice of hexagonal cells, shimmering membrane on which interference ripples chased like oil on water. It was the brain interface, naked. Float Y3's feed showed G values between plus 1G and minus 1G, oscillating 14 Hz, effectively stochastic gravity. Its quantum clock lost sync, then gained 12 microseconds relative to ship clock before feed cut. The packet nevertheless arrived by entangled mirror inside Annika's display before the drift. Negative latency. As the rift widened, water from either lip cascaded inward, yet the void never filled. It was as if volume drained into a sink, not in three space. Shock waves boomed like God's own timpani, supercavitating jets venting high into the stratosphere. Cascadia's engineering deck warned of hull torsion exceeding design limits. Mason tightened strain bulkhead dogs, then scrambled topside to witness impossible geometry. The Kailua hung 15 meters above the waterline, caught in a laminar updraft, sails limp as laundry. It floated in air, buoyed by lifted ocean vapor. Moana, harnessed to a mast stump, looked down at Mason's slack-jawed face. They shared a grin, equal parts terror and wonder. Keown yelled from bridge wing. The lattice pattern, pulse minima, align with corners of a Penrose tiling. Jesperson's brain leapt. Penrose tiling is a quasi-crystal projection, symbolic of non-periodic order in higher dimensions. It meant the interface encoded a periodic symmetry, a signature of coherent but non-repetitive physics, the hallmark of multiversal superposition. She activated the ballast telegraph for a last gamble, a 5-phase sweep encoding the Fibonacci word, the simplest aperiodic sequence. The massive diesels rolled foreaft, slamming steel against stops. Each shift jarred decks, but also pumped microgram variations into the rift like Morse dots. The lattice shimmered, reorganized, hexagons sliding into decagons, into kites and darts of Penrose fame. A single standing node blossomed dead center, brighter than arc weld. From it emanated a pulse, not water, not radiation, but structure itself rippling. Float X3, still alive, measured delta T equals 0 across all 3 onboard clocks, temporal coincidence, while spatial accelerometers read divergent directions simultaneously. The probe had become multi-located, a quantum macro object. Then came the final crest, berthed at rift's edge, 60 meters high, yet oddly gentle, curvature smooth as Gaussian hill. It moved not like water, but like the surface of water being dragged by underlying reality. Cascadia's bow rose, but no slamming, no burial. Hydrodynamic forces nullified by the node behind it. The ship sailed up the slope as if on a funicular. At the crest's summit, everyone on deck felt no weight. People and loose gear drifted a foot above steel. Laughter, wild, disbelieving, mingled with cries of awe. For 6 seconds they hung, horizon and infinity pools spilling into stars. They saw two suns, our own and a red-tinged twin, interference image of another cosmological constant. They saw continents that did not match any earthly map, luminous night-side cities spanning impossible archipelagos. And then gravity returned. Water settled. The rift zipped shut like film in reverse. The second sun blinked out. The ocean, at last, obeyed Newton again. Aftershock logistics blurred into weary competence. Retrieve floats, tend injuries, speed east under quiet diesel hum. Float X2 resurfaced 300 kilometers south, recovered weeks later by NOAA. Its clocks recorded simultaneous timestamps spaced 7.4 seconds apart, data that broke every reviewer's brain. NASA, ESA, and JAXA satellites imaged a transient sea surface depression matching the rift, so vast it altered sunlight scatter. Remote sensors logged it as an albedo glitch. Within 24 hours, the patch reverted to normal, leaving only terabytes of cascading data and human memories red raw with wonder. Epilogue: Echoes in a quasi-crystal sea. Back in San Diego, the Joint Task Force paper ballooned to 412 pages. Half the co-authors still insisted on the word hypothesis, yet reviewers whispered Nobel behind closed doors. Its thesis, Rogue Waves in the Polygon of Silence, are macroscopic signatures of sub-Planckian graviton solitons leaking through quasi-periodic junctions of adjacent branes. The oceanic medium amplifies femtoscale stress into meter-scale displacement via density-dependent resonance, effectively acting as the universe's bell. Information traverses the junction bidirectionally, unbound by classical causality. Float X time inversions constitute the first laboratory evidence of retrocausal signaling. The Penrose tiling lattice, observed on July 7, 2025, demonstrates that multiversal overlap manifests quasi-crystalline symmetry, hinting that spacetime itself may be a projection from an aperiodic higher-order manifold. The implications dwarfed dark energy or quantum gravity wars. If spacetime could whisper through oceans, then any massive fluid, planetary cores, gas giant atmospheres, perhaps even stellar plasma, might be cosmic radios. And so a new discipline was christened: hydrobrain interferometry. Annika and Keown, co-principal investigators, proposed a Pacific-wide grid of sinker-style gravity keys. Mason filed patents on ballast telegraphs. Kalea founded a bio-optics initiative to hunt coccolith blooms as natural traces of gravity dips. Moana took command of a rebuilt Kaialohia, twin masts now bearing quasi-crystal wind vanes tuned to microgal breezes. Captain Vaziri transferred to a polar vessel slated for Drake Passage, rumoured seat of another node, a man still loyal to water's deep grammar. Every month, Jespersen opens the gravimeter logs. Most nights, silence, but some midnights, always 0.48 hertz, always triplet chirps, slide beneath noise floor. When she hears them, she smiles, prints the strip, and tapes it to a growing collage labeled Next Whisper. She knows the ocean remembers: the bruise-colored slicks, the pixel waves, the moments when stars rose and fell like buoys. Somewhere, just beyond the edge of probability, a second sun waits for gravity's chord to resonate again. And when it does, the crew of the Cascadia will be ready to ride that impossible wave, outward, across horizons multiplying, into the quasi-crystal heart of the multiverse.